The doctor looked at me, then quietly asked one question. Is there anyone who actually cares enough to come? I smiled. Not because it was funny. Because I already knew the answer. The hospital had called my parents 6 times. My sister twice. Nobody came. Then my phone buzzed. I thought someone had finally answered. Instead, I opened a smiling family photo. My parents were raising champagne glasses. My sister had written only 7 words. Finally, a day without the drama. While I was still bleeding in an emergency room, they thought I was the family burden. They had no idea that before this week was over, they would lose the one thing they believed could never be taken away. The first thing I remember wasn't the pain. It was the sound of someone calling my name over and over. Ma'am, can you hear me? Everything around me felt distant, like I was underwater. The bright office lights blurred together as worried faces hovered above me. Someone was holding my hand. Someone else was telling everyone to step back. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was staring at a white hospital ceiling. A heart monitor beeped steadily beside me. My throat was dry. My arm felt heavy. A nurse noticed I was awake and immediately smiled. There you are, she said gently. You've given us quite a scare. What happened? You collapsed at work. My mind raced. Collapsed? That couldn't be right. I'd gone to work just like every other Tuesday. I had skipped breakfast, answered nearly 70 emails before noon, and volunteered to cover for another coworker who had called in sick. Nothing unusual. Nothing dramatic. Ironically, dramatic was the one word my family had spent years attaching to my name. If I questioned something, I was dramatic. If I defended myself, I was dramatic. If I said something hurt my feelings, I was being dramatic. Eventually, it became my unofficial nickname, the drama queen. Funny thing was, I hated conflict. I always had. The nurse checked the 4 connected to my arm before speaking again. Your coworkers acted quickly. The ambulance got you here in time. I nodded weakly. Then I asked the question that suddenly mattered more than anything else. My parents. She hesitated. We've been trying to reach your emergency contacts. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. They didn't answer? She offered a sympathetic smile. We've called several times. Several times. That wasn't like my parents. Or maybe it was exactly like them. My mother never answered unknown numbers. My father usually kept his phone on silent during golf or business lunches. Still, the hospital would leave a voicemail. Someone would call back, wouldn't they? I reached for my phone on the bedside table. 3 missed calls from work. 2 text messages from coworkers. Nothing from Mom. Nothing from Dad. Nothing from my younger sister, Ashley. I wasn't surprised. Ashley and I had never been close. Growing up, she was the golden child. Perfect grades. Perfect smile. Perfect daughter. Meanwhile, I somehow became the family disappointment without ever understanding why. When Ashley forgot Mom's birthday, everyone laughed. When I arrived 10 minutes late because of traffic, Mom didn't speak to me for a week. Different rules. Different standards. Different daughters. The nurse quietly left the room to give me privacy. As soon as the door closed, memories flooded back. Just 4 days earlier, we'd all been together for my father's 65th birthday dinner. Ashley had shown up 45 minutes late. My parents hugged her. My mother said, "Sweetheart, we're just happy you made it." Then I accidentally spilled a little water while reaching for the bread basket. Mom sighed loudly. There she goes again. Ashley laughed. I swear Emily could create drama in an empty room. Everyone laughed. Even Dad. I forced a smile because that was easier than defending myself. It always was. A soft vibration interrupted my thoughts. My phone lit up. For one hopeful second, I thought it was Mom returning the hospital's calls. Instead, it was a social media notification. Ashley had tagged me in a family photo. Confused, I opened it. The picture had been taken less than an hour earlier. My parents. Ashley. Her husband. My nieces. Everyone was smiling around a patio table at my parents' house. Steaks on the grill. Drinks raised in celebration. Sunshine. Laughter. It looked like the perfect family afternoon. Then I read the caption. Finally, a day without the drama. A laughing emoji. A heart emoji. More than 300 likes. Dozens of comments. Looks like everyone's finally relaxed. Family peace at last. Enjoy the quiet. None of them knew I was lying in an emergency room bed while doctors had spent the last hour trying to reach my parents. My hands began to shake. Not because I was angry, because something inside me finally broke. The nurse walked back into the room just as a single tear rolled down my cheek. She glanced at my phone, then looked at me with quiet concern. Is everything okay? I locked the screen, took one slow breath, and for the first time in my life, I stopped wondering how to make my family love me. Instead, I asked myself one question. What did I still owe people who had already decided I didn't matter? The morning after I was discharged from the hospital, I didn't call my parents. I didn't text Ashley. I didn't argue beneath her social media post. For years, I believed every painful moment deserved an explanation. This time, silence felt stronger. I drove straight to a quiet law office across town. The receptionist looked up and smiled. Good morning, Ms. Bennett. Mr. Harrison is expecting you. That surprised me. Expecting me? I hadn't spoken to my grandfather's attorney in almost 8 months. When I stepped into his office, Richard Harrison stood, shook my hand warmly, and gestured toward the chair across from his desk. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances, Emily. You heard about the hospital? He nodded. One of your coworkers called me. She remembered seeing my business card in your emergency contact folder. I smiled faintly. My family didn't answer. I know. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he opened a thick file with my grandfather's name printed across the cover. You once told your grandfather something he never forgot. I frowned. What was that? You said, family isn't the people who expect everything from you. It's the people who show up when you need them. I hadn't thought about that conversation in years. Grandpa had been recovering from knee surgery. I visited every evening after work, not because anyone asked me to, because I wanted to. Ashley visited once. My parents stopped by for photographs and left 20 minutes later. Grandpa noticed everything. He simply never complained. Mr. Harrison slid several documents across the desk. Your grandfather updated his estate plan 6 months before he passed away. I looked down at the paperwork. I remember signing some documents with him. You weren't just witnessing signatures. You became the trustee. The word caught me off guard. Trustee? He nodded. Your grandfather created a family trust that included the commercial building on Maple Avenue. Immediately, I knew the property he meant. An old brick office building downtown. For years, my father talked about renovating it into luxury apartments. Ashley constantly joked about which floor she'd claim once it became profitable. Everyone assumed it belonged to the family. Mr. Harrison gently corrected me. It belongs to the trust. I stared at him. And I'm the trustee? You are the sole trustee. He let the words settle before continuing. Your responsibility isn't to make everyone happy. It's to follow your grandfather's written instructions. I slowly turned another page. Every signature was real. Every page had been notarized years earlier. I couldn't believe none of us had discussed this after Grandpa died. Almost as if reading my thoughts, Mr. Harrison smiled. Your parents attended the reading. They left early. They assumed everything important would automatically pass to them. What did Grandpa actually want? He wanted the property managed by the one person he trusted to put responsibility ahead of entitlement. I felt my chest tighten, not from anger, from grief. Grandpa had believed in me when I barely believed in myself. Mr. Harrison leaned forward. There's something else. He opened another folder. You've received 3 formal purchase offers over the last 18 months. I ignored them. I know. I thought selling would upset my parents. And today, I looked out the office window. For the first time since the hospital, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about respect, about boundaries, about finally accepting that I couldn't keep sacrificing my own peace for people who celebrated my absence. What would Grandpa have done? Mr. Harrison answered, without hesitation. He would have followed the trust. He placed the newest offer in front of me. A respected local developer. Fair market value. Every condition satisfied. Every legal requirement met. The buyer had waited patiently for months, believing the property might eventually become available. I read every page carefully. Then I looked back at the attorney. If I approve this, the sale moves forward. And legally, you have full authority. What happens if my parents object? They're welcome to ask questions. He paused. But the documents are very clear. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the office windows. I thought about the hospital room, the unanswered phone calls, the family photo, the caption. Finally, a day without the drama. Maybe they truly believed I had always been the problem. Maybe they always would. But I no longer needed their approval to make responsible decisions. I picked up the pen, signed the first page, then the second, then the final authorization. Mr. Harrison gathered the documents with a small, respectful smile. I'll begin the closing process immediately. How long until everything is final? Only a few days. He carefully placed the signed papers into a folder before looking directly at me. Emily, once the closing documents are recorded, there will be nothing left for anyone to challenge. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the family's scapegoat. I felt like someone my grandfather had trusted to do the right thing. And that trust was worth more than anything my family had ever taken from me. 3 weeks later, the sale was finalized. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post anything online. I didn't call my parents to tell them. I simply signed the last document, thanked Mr. Harrison, and went back to living my life. For the first time in years, everything felt quiet, peaceful. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. Hello. Emily. Her voice sounded unusually tense. Why didn't you tell us? I already knew what she meant. The sale? How could you do this to your family? There it was. Not how are you feeling? Not are you recovering? Not even I'm sorry. Straight to the property. Straight to the money. I closed my eyes. Mom, the property belonged to the trust. It belonged to all of us. No, it didn't. Silence. Then came the anger. Your typical story would end with a screaming match. This one didn't, because I was too tired to argue. A few days later, my parents requested a meeting. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small restaurant near downtown. Dad looked older than I remembered. Mom looked furious. Ashley looked nervous. Nobody touched the food. Finally, Dad spoke. The attorney explained everything. I nodded. He said, Grandpa made you trustee. That's right. Mom leaned forward. But why would he do that? The question surprised me. Not because she asked it. Because after all these years, she genuinely didn't know the answer. Dad quietly looked down at the table. I think he already knew. Grandpa had watched everything. The favoritism, the excuses, the double standards, the way one daughter was constantly expected to earn love that the other received automatically. Ashley broke the silence. People are talking. I raised an eyebrow. What people? She looked embarrassed. The family. Apparently, word had spread quickly. Relatives learned the hospital had tried contacting my parents during my medical emergency. They learned about the social media post. They learned about the caption. And suddenly, the story wasn't about a building anymore. It was about choices. People began asking uncomfortable questions. Questions my family couldn't answer. Why didn't they return the hospital's calls? Why did they publicly mock someone they claimed to love? Why was a daughter alone in an emergency room while her family posed for pictures? For once, I wasn't the one being judged. Mom's voice became softer. We didn't know you were in the hospital. No, I replied calmly. You didn't. Another silence. Longer this time. Then Dad finally looked me in the eye. I'm sorry. The words hit harder than I expected, because they weren't followed by excuses. No blame. No justification. Just regret. Ashley looked down. I shouldn't have posted that picture. No, I said. You shouldn't have. A tear rolled down her cheek. And for the first time in years, nobody called me dramatic. Nobody laughed. Nobody dismissed my feelings. They simply listened. When the meeting ended, Mom stopped me outside. Can you ever forgive us? I thought about the hospital room, the unanswered calls, the years of being treated like an inconvenience. Then I thought about Grandpa, about trust, about self-respect, about finally choosing peace over approval. I can forgive you, I said, but trust takes longer. Mom nodded. For once, she accepted the answer. Months later, I used part of the proceeds from the sale to establish a community assistance fund in my grandfather's name. The program helped families facing unexpected medical crises and emergency expenses. It wasn't revenge. It was something better. Purpose. And every time I walked past the plaque carrying Grandpa's name, I remembered the lesson he left behind. The people who call you too much drama are often the same people who become uncomfortable when they're finally forced to face the consequences of their own actions. As for that family photo, Ashley deleted it months later. But by then, it didn't matter. Because the most important thing I gained wasn't the sale. It wasn't the money. It wasn't even justice. It was the freedom that comes from finally realizing your worth was never dependent on people who refused to see it.